If you guys can't hear me, maybe move closer or I'll wear out my voice. It's okay, I can wear out my voice. So my name is Chuck, this is Josh. So Daniel sort of kind of hinted at, but we're both former athletes. I was on the chess and checkers team. And Josh, what were you on?
Academic life. Academic
life, yeah. No, we both played football, a little basketball, and some lacrosse. So if you guys play those sports or you like sports, hats off to you. We'll have some time for questions at the end. So if you're curious maybe about who grows a better beard or who can bench more, just we can save those for the end, really. But so you guys are here. Love you, bro. Talk on forming authentic masculine friendship. So I don't know if you meant to be here or not, but you're here. Can't leave. If this wasn't the talk you were meant to be at, doors are locked. You're going to be here for 45 minutes, maybe longer. We're really it's our discretion, right? So, So what's this title about? Love you, bro. Forming authentic masculine friendship. What's this all about? Well, I think a good place to start to understanding what authentic masculine friendship is to kind of define some terms here. So what is friendship? Well, friendship is really relationship. So the church holds up that we as humans are relational beings. We can kind of understand from our sort of brain makeup, our aptitude for language and communication, things that other animals don't really have, or at least not to the degree that we have. We can deduce from these things, our brain aptitude and our brain makeup and aptitude for language and communication, that we are relational beings. We're made for relationship. That's how it works. That's how it functions. We tend to fall in line with other people and talk about things, and we grow in sort of relationship, right? So relationships are inherent to human beings. It's inherent to our life. And friendship is really a type of relationship. So really what happens in friendship is these relationships tend to be a little bit closer and a little bit more stable. So friendship is a type of relationship that's a little bit more stable and a little bit closer than other relationships, right? So really, I want to pull out two facets of friendship that make it unique to all other relationships. So the first is that it reoccurs. So this relationship is not a one-time thing, but it's something that happens often. That's pretty intuitive. A friendship, it's not like you just you say hi to somebody and you go on your day. Like it's something that you think sustains. It happens often. It's a relationship and an encounter that happens often. The second piece is it's reciprocal. There's sort of a give and take. So each person in a relationship, in a friendship, gives something, whether it's just their time and attention, or maybe like words and knowledge, maybe it's guidance, maybe it's a helping hand, gives something to the other who then gains something from it. And the same thing happens from the friend back to you. There's something reciprocal. So a friendship is a relationship that happens, it reoccurs, and is reciprocal. So it's a certain type of relationship. So that's what friendship is. Now, we have this notion of authentic friendships. So authentic friendships, what does that really even mean? Well, first we need to understand, okay, it's a type of friendship, but it's authentic. Okay. For us to understand what authentic friendships are, I think it's key for us to understand that there's really three categories of friendships. These three categories are friendship of utility, friendship of pleasure, and friendship of virtue. So, what's a friendship of utility? Friendship of utility is basically a friendship who's based on the usefulness of the one friend to the other. So, say, for instance, I like to go to Chipotle. And I go to Chipotle maybe once a week. I break the bank, $15 at Chipotle once a week. But I get to know the guy behind the counter, and I say, hey, do you mind, hooking me up with some little extra chicken or extra steak in my bowl? And he says, no problem. And every once in a while, maybe I give him a little extra tip because I appreciate what he's doing for me. We have developed some sort of friendship of utility. There's a usefulness in me being a customer for him. It provides sustained revenue. He's getting $15 a week from me, and he himself is actually getting a tip. So he's staying employed because I am one of his customers. I'm finding some usefulness from him because he's giving me a little extra chicken or steak, and he's also, making my bowl or my burrito. So there's some sort of reciprocal nature of usefulness between each other, right? So that's like sort of a friendship of utility. That's sort of the basis of our friendship, is that we help each other, and I give him money and he gives me a burrito. That's essentially the basis of our friendship in this example. The second piece is this friendship of pleasure. So this friendship is based on some sort of delight, happiness, or pleasure that the both of us bring to each other. So say, for instance, Josh and I, we tend to have similar interests, similar goals. We like this similar sports. We tend to think alike. So we enjoy each other's presence, especially when we're doing things. We enjoy playing basketball together. He's kind of tough down low, but yeah, I mean, that's part of sports. But we enjoy playing sports together. We tend to have similar jokes and similar minds and like outlook on life. And so we enjoy each other's presence. Being each other's presence, there's something, the transaction that happens is pleasure. Like I enjoy being in Josh's presence. So that sort of relationship, if it's understood that the basis of my relationship with Josh is strictly that he brings me happiness, I have fun playing activities with him, like that could be understood as a friendship of pleasure. If the only thing that I get out of the relationship is my delight and pleasure from being with Josh, and it's rooted in that and not in something else, then it's a friendship of pleasure, okay? Now, spoiler, the authentic friendship is going to be this friendship of virtue, which I'm going to get to here next, but these two, not quite. So, a friendship of virtue. What is a friendship of virtue? Well, a friendship of virtue can be a friendship where there's usefulness that one brings to the other. I mean, that's sort of the reciprocal nature of friendship. There's a give and a take, right? So it can be useful and it can be pleasurable. Like there can be a lot of delight in being in each other's presence or enjoying a similar activity. But what makes a friendship of virtue different is that the two people in friendship are striving after virtue. They're striving after living a good, holy life, right? They're working to be good, honest men. I see we have some women here. Good, honest people. And they're trying to follow the Lord. And they're working to say, okay, these aren't just things that I want, but these are things that I'm actively going to try to work toward and grow in. So they're taking steps. So that's sort of the difference between these two friendships, a friendship of utility and a friendship of pleasure, from the friendship of virtue. So that's essential for us to understand first, okay? So why is the friendship of virtue the true, authentic friendship? Why is it that really the friendship where their two friends are striving after a holy, good life, a virtuous life, why is that the one that's authentic compared to one that's like pleasure or utility? Well, to understand that, I think it'd be good for us to break down like what authentic means. You know, like let's get a definition of authentic. Maybe many of you start your papers by like saying like Webster's definition of so-and-so is this. Well, that's what I'm doing here. So definition of authentic, what's it mean? Authentic means it's of true origin. It's not false or an imitation. It's real. And how do we really know if things are real? Well, I think by testing them, by poking holes at them, by seeing, is something substantive or is it some sort of imitation? Is it fake? Is it not of a true origin? So as I mentioned, the friendship of virtue is the one that's authentic. Why? Well, let's look at when we poke holes at these, when we challenge these other two friendships, what happens? So friendship of utility. It's a weak friendship. It's easily dissolved. Let's take that Chipotle example, for instance. Say, I have this relationship with my buddy. He's behind the counter. His name's, I don't know, Jeffrey. I don't know if there's any Jeffreys in here. His name's Jeffrey. And we have this thing going, a good thing going. And we've had it going for a while. And all of a sudden he's like, I've been grinding here at Chipotle. I want to go somewhere else. I want to go to Burger King. They're going to pay me $2 extra. Well, if it's me, I prefer Chipotle over Burger King. I'm not going to go to Burger King. And what's he going to do? Throw an extra patty on? Probably not. He'll get in trouble for that. Something changed there between our relationship. And I'm no longer really going to be going to where Jeffrey works for my food. I'm going to stay at Chipotle. Chipotle's been good to me, They take my $15, I get a burrito. Maybe I don't have the extra chicken or steak, but it's good. What happened there between my relationship with Jeffrey is that the usefulness of him to me broke. It dissolved. Our friendship dissolved because the usefulness, the thing that our relationship was based on, that he gave me some extra chicken and bacon, occasionally I give him a tip, it was no longer there. He's at a different place. That thing isn't there. So we're no longer necessarily friends based on that, right? Friendship of pleasure. This also can be easily dissolved. And like the friendship of utility, it's easily dissolved when the pleasant activity, the thing that we enjoyed together, or the way that we enjoy each other changes. So say, for instance, and I don't want to foreshadow here, but say Josh and I like to play basketball a lot, which we do, and he gets career-ending knee injury or something, an injury where he can no longer play. Well, he's no longer going to be playing basketball, so we're no longer necessarily enjoying that activity, right? But maybe there's other things that we enjoy. But say that, for instance, he stops playing sports in general. Now, if I'm a guy who's like, man, sports are it, like that's how I communicate, that's how I live, sports are my thing, and Josh is like, I can't do sports anymore, so he like, I don't know, he like picks up the hobby of reading, or like maybe he plays chess, and he's like really good at, this isn't knocking any of that, it's just, these are differences here, right? So the pleasure that I get out of life is not the pleasure that he gets out of life. So the pleasure, the basketball and the other things that we held in common, that held us together as friends, is no longer there. And really, when you don't have an authentic friendship, when the one thing is removed and it falls apart. That's what we see here in these simply friendships of pleasure, friendships of utility. So you guys are in high school. You guys are contemplating college. Maybe some of you guys are on the cusp of college. You have your high school friends, and a lot of these friendships are going to be falling into one of these two categories: friendships of pleasure or friendships of utility. You'll see, I know it from my experience, any adult can tell you, when you go to college and you're removed from these people, the usefulness or the pleasure is kind of removed, a lot of these friendships dissolve. Sometimes that's okay. You're not meant to be close friends with everyone for your entire life, but you'll see that like these friendships will dissolve. Why? Well, they're not necessarily based on two people coming after virtue. They're based on a pleasure, a pleasant activity, or some sort of usefulness, and eventually that can go. So the friendship of virtue is the authentic friendship because it's not easily dissolved. It's hard to dissolve. So there's two virtuous people. They find pleasure and usefulness in the other, but they're also themselves working after following the Lord and growing in their good humanness. Right? They're actively pursuing that. So my friend who is actively pursuing virtue, if I'm in a virtuous relationship, he is a good model for me, and he's a good corrector for me, and likewise I am for him. And I mean, you'll know this as you go and you form these friendships, they're hard to dissolve. It doesn't matter time or distance, they don't really affect these sort of friendships because there's a sort of similar kindred spirit that's a part of them. So authentic friendships are these friendships of virtue. And a friendship is just a relationship that's reciprocal and that reoccurs. So we've covered authentic friendship, and Josh is going to come up here and talk about the masculine piece.
All right. Thank you, Chuck. All right, so obviously Chuck just talked a lot about friendship. Now I'm going to hit more on exactly what distinguishes masculine friendships, or what is unique about men being friends with each other as opposed to men and women, or women and women being friends. And I want to approach this by actually just looking at a few differences between men and women. So God, in his infinite wisdom, made men and women equal in dignity, made us equal in belovedness, equal in our rational souls. But God also, in his infinite wisdom, made us different. There are differences between men and women. Just one quick one is that in high-stress adrenaline situations, all the core, or all the blood in a woman's body tends to go towards her core in order to protect her vital organs and to keep her alive, right? Because when women are pregnant, like they're carrying their baby, and if the mother dies, the baby dies. Whereas in high-stress situations, these high-stress adrenaline situations, the blood in a man's body flows to their extremities and their brain, so their hands and their feet, so that they're able to quickly react and protect. So both of these movements of blood are for protection, but for different reasons. And so I think this really shows how men's naturally have this kind of outward moving, outward action, or outward and action oriented. And then there's some slight differences in the brain makeup between men and women. So right, we all have a left and right brain, or left and right hemisphere, and then there's these connectors in between our brains that communicate between the two halves, right? Because each half of the brain kind of controls different things. And according to research, that women tend to have more connectors in between the two halves of their brains. So this is what leads them to believe that women are generally more intuitive, and especially when women experience stuff, they are able to actually just feel their emotions and understand what's going on. Whereas men, generally, we have to, because we have less connectors, we generally have to think about our experiences more and to really process our emotions out. And then, so a third difference is pretty simple, but just that men tend to be more goal-oriented. We like to have tasks and see things that we can do and then go and achieve them. And I think these three things kind of help inform us about like what a masculine friendship is like. So again, we're externally oriented, preferring to think and do. We need time to process our emotions, but we're also goal-oriented. And I think this tells us that oftentimes men form friendships based on that second category that Chuck was talking about, based on friendships of pleasure, where we have some common interest or common activity that we're doing or common goal. Right? I can think of a ton of friends I made in high school just by playing football or lacrosse, or being in my particular classes. These were people I saw all the time and was very comfortable with, and really formed good friendships but didn't last beyond high school. And I want to posit that these friendships, that this is like usually a beginning way of becoming friends for guys, but it is also a good way to start deepening our friendships as well. It's a place where our friendships can go from friendships of pleasure to friendships of virtue. And I think there's two main reasons for this. So because our interactions and our friendships form around a common activity or goal, we are usually like doing something amidst these. So think about sports, or maybe some guys like Boy Scouts, so they're into a lot of hiking, or you form a friendship around playing video games, or as guys get older, maybe you like to grill together. And in all these situations, there's this tendency of men to go shoulder to shoulder, and like you're focusing on the one thing. So like when you're playing video games, you're kind of sitting there with your friends facing the TV, or if you're going hiking, you guys are you're in a line, or you're like next to each other talking, but you're always walking forward. And same thing with like grilling or kind of other stuff of that nature. You guys are like, you're focused on the one. And it's not to say that men can't talk face to face, or that that it doesn't happen, but it's just saying that we are subconsciously pretty comfortable shoulder to shoulder when we're in our conversations. And I think that this naturally creates a more comfortable space for us, where we start to process our emotions and feelings. I know in my own life that I'm able to best process what's going on in my life, what's going on internally, when I go work out, or like I'm actually start to do something. And so when we are doing these shared activities, right, based in friendships of pleasure with our friends or with people around us, that's when we start to actually process our emotions, our feelings, even if it's like subconsciously. But the comfortability of those situations actually allows us to start sharing and being more open about what's going on in our lives and what's bothering us or what's good. And it's just a natural setting for us to kind of start to open up and kind of express ourselves. I think about an example in my life is the first summer I moved away from home to live at a parish. I was kind of away from my family for a lot that summer. I was still around. I was like an hour away, but I have two younger brothers, and my one, he's like 2 years younger than me. Like every time I'd come home, we'd like start fighting, and like he was always mad at me, and I could never really figure out why. It wasn't until the end of the summer, and I think my mom pointed this out. It was like, we haven't spent any time together that summer, and so I was like, okay, we can fix this. So I like drove down, picked him up, and we like got lunch, went for like a hike that day. We're like throwing rocks in the pond and stuff like that, and just had a really awesome time. And what I realized is that just simply spending that time with my brother really deepened our brotherhood and our friendship as brothers. It was a time where we were able just to mess around, but also we were able to just like be ourselves and just be in each other's company. And it was a simple thing, but it really, I think, was healing for both of us and showed us both how in the future, how we need to stay connected and stay as brothers. So, and just a final note about this section of like my talk about masculine friendships and friendships of virtue is that if we want to grow in holiness and if we want friends who care about their faith and who care about their holiness, a good thing to do is set holiness and heaven as our goal. Oftentimes we form friends with people who share similar goals as us. So if we have these heaven and holiness as our top goal, as our top priority, we will naturally start to get to know more and more people who have these same goals, and will naturally start to become friends with them. And it's a slow process, but I think it's something to kind of keep in the back of our minds and to consider. So now we're going to transition back to Chuck, who's got a little bit more.
Yeah, so we've covered sort of defining the title or the subtitle of this, forming authentic masculine friendships, right? What's it all mean? What's it all mean? There's some interesting points here, but what's it all mean? Well, I think a good place for us to go to kind of understand a little bit more is Scripture. So Josh mentioned this sort of notion of being sort of shoulder to shoulder. And a great image for us is this understanding of living stones, of being living stones. So this comes from 1 Peter, the second chapter, verses 1 through 5, really five verses. And I want to focus on these for a little bit, and we'll kind of extrapolate from there. So I'll just read this here briefly. So it begins, rid yourselves of all malice, all deceit, insincerity, envy, and all slander. Like newborn infants, long for pure spiritual milk so that through it you may grow into salvation. For you have tasted that the Lord is good. Come to him, a living stone, rejected by humans, but chosen and precious in the sight of God. So this first piece here, rid yourselves of all malice, deceit, insincerity, envy, and slander. And like newborns, long for spiritual milk, long for the things of God, long for living water. This whole notion here is, this is what we hear in 1 Peter is be virtuous people. Rid yourself of these things that really hold you back. Malice, deceit, all these things. Follow Christ. Long for pure spiritual milk. Come to him, a living stone, Christ, right? So this is really the call to be virtuous. And then to virtuous friendship is what we get here at the end. So we long to come to him, a living stone, and like living stones, let yourselves be built into a spiritual house, to be a holy priesthood, to offer spiritual sacrifices acceptable to God through Jesus Christ. Like living stones, let yourselves be built into a spiritual house. Josh mentioned this notion of shoulder to shoulder, It's kind of like living stones being put next to each other. We're not stones, we're not rock, but we can think of this spiritually. This is a spiritual home. Spiritually, how this works, how this actually happens in real life. So maybe you're hearing this and you're saying, okay, Chuck, I get it. Be built into a spiritual home. All right, God's going to put me where he wants me, and I'm just going to have to be there. And I think a lot of times we imagine it as this is kind of it. We got this crappy drawing of a picture of a house, but okay, that's Christ the cornerstone, perfectly square. And, here I am, or there I am. Okay, Christ has put me there. And it's sort of this, I don't know, this thing that kind of seems a little fake, a little hokey, a little too sentimental. I think it's sort of like the Instagram. Okay, this looks perfect. My goodness, look at that. That's a brick. It's manufactured. That's not a real stone. It's a brick. I think when we really understand ourselves, it's just I'm not like this perfect square cornerstone. I'm not like Christ. Not yet, but I'm not him. I don't look like this. And God's going to put me somehow in his house and I'm going to look exactly like that? No, I'm not. What does this shoulder to shoulder even look like? I have weaknesses, I have sins, I have habits, I have my own desires and my own wants for my life that often aren't what my brother wants or my friend wants. There's inconsistencies here with between us as men. And I think when we start to understand that, we start to see things a little bit differently. What this spiritual home actually looks like that. Like real stones. Okay, these are knocked out of a big boulder outside of a cliff, or they're just, I don't know, collected somewhere. But these are pretty rough. Like, there's not like nice crisp lines. Like there's, you don't see these like beautiful, you imagine you have this like, this level line that's coming here. I mean, you probably see this often in YouTube or something, or maybe you're not in the same YouTube stuff that I'm into, but like, like guys like laying bricks, just like doing some manly things. Like, it's not level. Like, this is reality here. That's what we look like. We have inconsistencies, we have weaknesses, we have sin, all these things that sort of butt up against the brother that's shoulder to shoulder with us. But that's not a problem. This is just how reality is. That's what we're actually called to be. I think it's important for us to understand that we, despite having these inconsistencies, and we're not smooth yet, we're trying to be smooth, we're trying to be like this cornerstone, perfectly square, but we're not there yet. So what happens in the process, Josh will kind of get into this, what happens in the process is we sort of are smoothed out. There's a smoothing out process that happens when we go shoulder to shoulder and weight is put onto us, some stressors of life. We're smoothed out and we fit together a little bit better. So Josh will kind of get into that and like what that looks like. But
yeah, so again, just Chuck kind of talking about how like we're these jagged stones and we're not a perfect foundation, but we are working on ourselves and we're trying to grow. And I think a process for this that I kind of wrote out was just that in our own lives, in our own friendships, in our own relationships, we tend to have moments of conflict, and then we come to greater awareness, and then there's time for correction and accountability. And I think this is just an easy way. It's like this is not always like this, but it's an easy way of seeing how we can become more squared and how we can become more weathered. So starting with conflict, as Chuck was kind of saying, we're not all these perfect stones, but in fact we're kind of built and stacked on top of one each other, and through our weaknesses and our faults and our failings, and we often have parts of us that parts of our lives where we kind of jut out and that are jagged edges that bump into and run into other parts, other stones, if you will. And so I think this is really where we have moments of conflict. And right, we all know that we're broken and that we have this conflict. But I want to posit that if we approach conflict differently, we can actually see it as an opportunity to grow. When we come into conflict, people, it can be an opportunity to actually come to a greater self-awareness. So the second part, when we come to these conflicts that arise out of either our weaknesses and faults or maybe another person's, and just kind of like us colliding, we can only grow in these situations if we first come to a greater self-awareness. And I think this is so key in all of our lives, is that growing in self-awareness is really the key to this whole process. When we grow in self-awareness, we can come to understand the issue at hand, and we can also understand kind of the internal workings in our hearts and in our minds of like what's causing us to do this thing that's causing our friend a problem, or like what are they doing that's causing us a problem. And this really, self-awareness really only occurs in two ways: of either our own reflection and prayer and it being revealed to us, or a friend coming up to us and offering us correction, or a friend coming up to us and making us aware of the issue at hand. And this is really where friendships of virtue are so key, that if you are really trying and striving to be holy and you have a friend who's doing the same and you guys are aware of this, if that person really cares about you, they'll come to you and try and offer you some correction. They would, if they love you enough, will make you aware of the ways that you're failing, of the ways that you're kind of shortcoming. And so this leads to correction and growth. So I think I want to begin this part by just saying that our first move, when we're going towards, looking towards kind of building ourselves up or growing ourselves or changing, is to turn to Christ, is to turn to the Lord and ask the Lord to be with us, to aid us in our struggles, to aid us in our growth, and also to surrender ourselves to the Lord. Right? When we present our weaknesses to God, we present our failings and even our strengths, and we give them to God, we allow God to be our strength, right? When St. Paul says power is made perfect in weakness, or weak, I think that's the way it is. Or he says, it is then when I'm weak that I'm strong. It's because he's turning to Christ and giving him his weaknesses and relying on Christ to be his strength. And so we can do that in our own lives. And I think that's always the very first step, is to recognize that God is always giving God's grace to me, and that I can always turn to God's grace, and I can always step towards Christ. And I think the second element of correction is really accountability. When we have accountability with ourselves and with other people, it really sets us up, I think, for really working at our growth and our change. I can think of in my own life the times where I didn't really have accountability, and I set some goal, or I said, I'm not doing that sin again, but without the accountability of talking to someone about it and really keeping up with someone about it, I usually fall short, and I'm easy just to kind of fall into the way. And so again, I think friendships of virtue are so key in here, where I can go to a brother, I can go to a friend and say, hey, I'm really struggling with this sin, or this is something I want to improve in my life. Can I keep tabs with you and just we talk once a week about this, or something? It doesn't have to be super formal, but it's just having someone who can pray for you and who is aware that you're struggling in this way, or that you want to grow in this way, is super key. So conflict, self-awareness, correction, and accountability. Just a kind of a 4-step process of our growth into being built more into this spiritual house, being built into the body of Christ. And so with this, I think Chuck's going to kind of come up and close us out.
Yeah, so kind of talked maybe a lot on these pieces of friendship. Make it masculine, make it authentic, right? We know that friendship of virtue is one where two guys, hopefully us, are striving to be like Christ and to be virtuous, right? And that in that friendship, we, unperfect stones, are made more smooth, are made closer to Christ. The Lord has sort of given us each other to help us in that process. But I think an important point, and this is something that Josh kind of mentioned a little bit in the masculine section, is that this idea of it takes time for a lot of this to happen, for a lot of us to grow in virtue, for these processes, for the smoothing out to actually occur. And we really need to understand that, be patient, but put in the time with people that we know as friends and that we're maybe trying to grow towards being friends of virtue with. Spending time together, understanding that this is going to take time, and knowing that as he mentioned, as men, we're not as disposed, in general, as maybe women are at understanding our feelings, where we're at, and maybe even conversing face to face. Where it's just we just like to focus on other things. And so that's all right. Spend time focusing on the things together, and slowly things will kind of bubble up as they do. Maybe there's a contention you have against your buddy, man, I just don't want to hang out with you right now. What is that? And you kind of have to work it out. Eventually it kind of comes up and you're like, oh, I see it. And that's a point where Christ really invites you. He says, you're not going to be harmed by telling your friend this. Actually, in terms of this, correction is a path of love. And that actually means no, I want to continue to be your friend, and I want goodness for you. So speaking up and saying hey, this is how I'm seeing things. I don't know, this is how I feel about it. I just want to talk about it. What are your thoughts? That form of correction is necessary. But as men, I don't think it's as easy for us to just do that right away. I think it requires some time and patience and stepping into that, but also really just focusing on spending time together, because really our grand scheme of things, our focus is not that. I remember when I came to seminary, my focus was okay, all right, I got my path, the Lord smacked me around. He's kind of showed me, okay, this is who I am. He's showing me love. He hasn't really smacked me around, but I use that imagery because, I don't know, I think it's funny. But he showed me who he was, and I was I'm in, Lord. I want it. And I thought, okay, that means that, okay, I'll listen to you through other people, but knowing I don't want anyone to deter me from my path. I quickly realized, man, I didn't realize how much I needed other friends, and I didn't realize that until I was sort of forced to be in community with other guys. And fortunate enough to have guys who were seeking to grow in virtue at the seminary that were good friends for me, good pieces of correction like Josh has been for me in my life, and help guide me and help shape me. Like, we are shaped by the people around us. We just don't necessarily realize that. So, I guess I just want to encourage us that authentic and masculine friendship probably looks a little bit different than maybe we thought it did. But it's essential for us as men to be smoothed out, to become like Christ. Yeah. Okay. All right, so we'll break into Q&A if you guys want. Maybe you guys can ask who has the better beard or who grows a better beard.
He shaved his to make me feel better. Yeah.
Kind of two-part question type. Can you talk on the three types of friendships? Maybe recognizing what type of friendships you're in, and not expecting more out of a friendship of utility or a friendship of pleasure. So, like, you may be trying to initiate a friendship of virtue, and they may not be on that same page, and that may be okay, but you can't expect more out of them, right, than they're willing to put in. So, with that in mind, like you said, Christ is our model. Like, he's the ultimate friend, the ultimate masculine friend at that, and how his vulnerability helps shape his friendships. So, like, recognizing friendships, and you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I mean, Josh mentioned it, like, going to Christ first, like for instance, like me, like, I was an incredibly insecure, shy kid. Like, I have a frame that looks like, okay, like, this guy, like, knows, I played football in college, like, I was shy as could be, like, I didn't know how to talk to people, like, I was just like, I didn't know these things, and like, it was really Christ, coming to know Christ, who was like, he freed me to, like, just be me. Like, okay, yeah, I trip on a lot of things, I hit my head on things, I'm tall, like, it's okay, man, like, it's okay, But yeah, friendship with Christ as a means of, like, okay, sort of finding your stability. But then knowing, so the three categories of friendships, those are all friendships. But understanding, like, a friendship of utility, where it's really, the only thing that we have here that really holds us together is this thing that we find is useful to both of us. I shouldn't be going to that friend for correction, for all these things that a friendship of virtue should bring to me. That doesn't mean I don't try to cultivate this friendship, a guy who I respect, and the guy, the Chipotle guy who maybe I liked, we had some conversation, but, like, doesn't mean I don't try and cultivate that, but I don't understand, I shouldn't rely on that as my, like, best friendship. My best friendship should be something that resembles closely and attains towards the friendship of virtue, I think. So not leaning so much on the friendship of utility and pleasure as our, like, strong friendships, but that also doesn't mean that we shouldn't then maybe try and draw those deeper. Because, I mean, ultimately, I think we don't understand it, but, like, we desire those friendships with everyone. We desire a friendship of virtue with everyone that we have a friendship of usefulness or just pleasure with. It's not always easy, and we're not always, either of us aren't always in the same place where that can happen, but everyone desires this. Everyone needs those friendships. So, yeah, I think it's a good question. I don't know if you have.
No, I think so.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Comments?
Father Ian?
Chuck, how do you develop the friendship of virtue when you feel as though all you have are utility and pleasure friendships, or you don't know of a guy that's actually also running after the Lord to actually have that friendship? Like, do you have to enter seminary to have that friendship?
That's a really good question. No, I think, that was something before seminary, like, I had friends that was just like, I knew that, like, these friendships weren't deep. Like, we didn't talk about spiritual things. Like, I was trying to follow the Lord, but, like, I sort of knew, like, they were too, but, like, that wasn't what we talked about. It was just, like, the pleasure things or, like, the useful things. And it was just like, so I think, like, one thing that I try to do was, like, okay, I'm secure in who I am. Like, I'm going to be vulnerable with them. I'm going to sort of do some of, like, the things that are, like, I'm not necessarily leaning on them for, like, my guidance. I have Christ for that. But, like, I'm going to be vulnerable with them. Hopefully that opens them up to, like, view this as more of, like, a pleasurable thing or, like, a useful thing. It's like, okay, I'm a man. I was a boy, but, like, I'm a man, like, I can do this. And, like, you kind of figure it out, But I think that's a really good question. Yeah.
I think you need to remember you don't need a
You need a couple of good friends. And I think you need to know when to be able to back away from a friendship that's not giving you what you need. If you say like, hey, somebody says, hey, you want to go play basketball Sunday morning? You're like, no, I'm going to church. You want to come with me? If they're like, heck no, that might not be something that you pursue. But also, you need to be willing to be the one to break the ice. Some of my best friends, if I had not spoken first, we would never have talked. So you have to be able to speak, break the ice, to say something. Hey, you want to go grab whatever, coffee? If they say no, you've lost nothing. But if you never say anything, you may miss out completely.
Yeah, I definitely like that too. Like when I've opened up to guys in my life, just like asked them to like hang out and then just kind of like initiated deeper conversation, I've always found that they've related really well, and like that fear, I think, like I always have this internal fear of like, what if they don't get me, or like, like that fear of being rejection. That's just kind of natural to us. Every time I've kind of like reached out to a guy and like kind of mustered up my courage and gone into a deeper conversation, I've always found that they've related and also just been really reciprocating of that. So. Yeah.
Yeah.
What time is it? Yeah.
Maybe-
I think that's
maybe-
about it. Oh.
Yeah, we got one more question. Yeah.
Being a 33-year-old that, real very early in life, I came here from undergrad, and I met a friend I was a math major with, and we were originally friends of utility, because I needed to pass that class, he was really smart. And then we became friends of pleasure, because he enjoyed your company. Look at that. And it took him 11 years to turn into a friend of virtue, where he was working on me and the Lord was working on all these years. So all of you being here is wonderful. I've not been here, caught that in high school at a retreat. So the fact that you guys are here, you have an opportunity to be that iron help sharpen you. You have that opportunity to be that friend that can go out and correct, coming from a place of love and vulnerability. But it is going to take time. So don't write people off as they're not responding to your time. Pray for them, work on them in love. And like he says, reach out. If it doesn't work. But all we're doing is trying to sow seeds. So figure out what type of friendship it is, but don't be afraid to work on something for a long time. Because I wouldn't get here and hadn't worked on it for a decade. So
Yeah.
we need those friendships. I
Yeah. I need those friendships. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
All right. Thanks for coming,
nothing
guys.
else. Yeah. Thanks, guys.